in the world we live in today, it seems like a lot of people don't think about second, third, fourth order consequences. So people are just looking, okay, here and now. Okay, well, what's the problem with letting biological males compete with women in sports? We don't want to discriminate against anybody. It makes people feel good. It makes me feel like I'm a virtuous soldier who's being inclusive, and I don't want to be identified as transphobic or be stuck with any other label, etc. But they're not thinking, okay, wait, if we actually do this, what are the long-term impacts, not just on women's sports and safety and spaces, but even just the fabric of reality? And I think that's something that you are deeply concerned about, right? Just this fabric of reality, because if you can get people to accept that, then, if you can get someone to just accept that, okay, there's men and women are identical, but they're also different, and you can also switch between them, and you can also be non-binary, and gender is also a social construct, but yet you can transition from one side. You're supposed to hold all these ideas simultaneously in your head to be politically correct, which are logically they're not coherent, right? All of these things cannot be simultaneously true, but you're just supposed to accept it and shut up, lest someone call you a name or some kind of bigot or phobe or ism, which naturally people don't like. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So just to continue on your point about the cognitive inconsistencies, in one of my earlier books, The Consuming Instinct, I think in maybe chapter 1, I remark on the fact that many of these, at the time, I didn't call them idea pathogens, but I was already enmeshed in all that nonsense because I'm an academic. So many of these, social justice warriors argue that heterosexuality is an imposed norm, whereas homosexuality is innate. Now, you don't need to be a fancy evolutionary biologist or a fancy evolutionary psychologist to see the problem in that position for you ready, drum roll, a sexually reproducing species. So for a sexually reproducing species, heterosexuality is a form of imposed heteronormativity, but homosexuality, which is the Darwinian cul-de-sac, is perfectly innate. So, I mean, when you're able to spew something like that, not as satire, but as part of a fundamental tenet that you're teaching in universities, we're going down the wrong path. But to go back to your earlier question, so when I was looking at all of these idea pathogens, and I've only mentioned now so far postmodernism, but if you want, I'll discuss a few others. One of the things that I wanted to do is, so I'm someone who's very consilient in my thinking, and consilience is a term that has existed for a long time, but the gentleman who kind of reinvigorated into our collective lexicon is a evolutionary biologist by the name of E.O. Wilson, who wrote, I can't recommend his book enough to people. The book is called Consilience, Unity of Knowledge. Consilience refers to exactly that, unity of knowledge. So physics is more consilient than sociology, not because physicists are inherently smarter than sociologists, but it's because they create unified, organized trees of knowledge, which sociologists don't. So one of the problems with the social sciences is that they typically lack consilience, which is something that I've written about extensively in my own scientific work. And so as someone who thinks in a very synthetic, consilient way, one of the things that I wanted to do as I was writing The Parasitic Mind is to look at what are some things that are common across all of these idea pathogens. So in the same way that if you are an oncologist who studies some cancer, you recognize that pancreatic cancer is different than leukemia, which is different from a melanoma, but yet these cancers do share at the very least one thing in common, which is the unchecked division of cells. So we know that there is some fundamental similarity across different cancers. And so I wanted to propose something similar for these idea pathogens, and that's going to speak to your original question. All of these idea pathogens have the following in common. They wish to free us from the shackles of reality by looking at some noble cause. And in the pursuit of that noble cause, if you have to murder truth in the service of that noble cause, so be it, right? So for example, the transgender activist in the pursuit of the desire, which I think you and I would agree, transgender people should not face any systematic discrimination or systemic discrimination. That doesn't mean that in the pursuit of that goal, we then murder the truth via some of the insane positions. It's not only women who menstruate, it's people who menstruate, right? There is no hormonal, physiological, biological, behavioral, anatomical, morphological differences between men and women. Science has not established that. So when you're able to depart from reality so shockingly in the service of protecting transgender people who deserve protection, that I always tell people I could chew gum and walk at the same time. I could sign up for all sorts of noble justice causes without ever ceding a millimeter of truth. So I think that's the problem with all these idea pathogens, right? They start off with a kind of feel-good platitude. I don't want closed borders. That feels racist. I want everybody. But you're not a 3-year-old child, right? I mean, a nation exists as a nation because it has inviolable borders. If anybody could get in. So there is kind of this childlike empathy that comes with a lot of these progressive platitudes, right? I mean, but don't you want to love transgender people? But don't you think that Mexican and Guatemalans deserve to come to the US? Yeah. Well, no, that's why we have a country, right? I mean, I feel very bad for the homeless person who's outside, but I don't leave my front door open. So it really comes from, as you said, an inability to look, as you correctly said, second order, third order, fourth order effects. And why are they incapable of doing that? Because they've given up on their abilities to engage in critical thinking. And so what I do in the parasitic mind is I say, if you want to navigate through many of these important debates, here are some epistemological tools that you can use in defending a position.